Hello photographers, let's talk about white balance in photography. White balance is a critical photography tool for ensuring that you get accurate colors in your photos. The reason we need white balance is because all light is not equal. Light is electromagnetic radiation and the human eye is able to detect a certain spectrum of that radiation. The spectrum of light that our eyes can detect is not hard fixed because the sensitivity of the eye varies a bit from person to person. But generally speaking, humans can see electromagnetic radiation with wavelengths between 400 nanometers and 700 nanometers. That range is the literal rainbow of colors that we can see. At the 400 nanometer end of the spectrum, the wavelengths are shorter and our eyes detect and translate those wavelengths as bluish or cooler colors. At the 700 nanometer end of the spectrum, the wavelengths are longer and our eyes detect and translate those wavelengths as reddish or warmer colors. So different light sources emit light at different wavelengths along the visible spectrum. A classic example is a tungsten bulb or any bulb labeled as soft white. This type of light source emits light with a wavelength around 600 nanometers, which our eyes detect as orange in color. But here's the thing, when you're sitting in a room with a soft white light source, your brain autocorrects the colors you see to the point that you don't even notice the orange color cast from the light. If you look at a piece of white paper lit by a soft white light source, your brain knows the paper is supposed to be white. So even though the visual stimuli it's receiving shows the paper as orange, your brain just makes you see white. White balance is the tool that allows the camera to do the same perception correction that your brain does. If white balance didn't exist and you took a photo using a soft light, the whole image would have an orange color cast to it like this. And if you took a photo with a cooler light source, the photo would look like this with this bluish color cast. So if you want accurate colors in your photos, you want to white balance to match the light source you are shooting in. In most cases, the process of doing this is pretty straightforward. All you have to do is look at the light source you are shooting in and choose an appropriate white balance option for that source. And the white balance options are literally labeled for the type of light that you should use them in. Most cameras have auto, tungsten, fluorescent, daylight, shade, flash, cloudy, a custom option, and some even have a Kelvin option. So for daylight, use the daylight white balance. For tungsten or soft white bulbs, use the tungsten setting. It's kind of dummy proof except for auto, custom, and Kelvin. So first let's talk about auto. As far as white balance goes, auto actually does a pretty good job in most common shooting situations. Your camera comes set to auto white balance by default. If you've never changed your white balance, your camera is still in auto white balance. And if you've never had a problem with the colors in your photos, then for the conditions you normally shoot in, auto white balance is doing its job. However, if you've taken photos and you've been frustrated with the orange or blue or other color casts to the photos, then auto white balance has failed you. If auto white balance is failing you, the first step is to start using the other common presets such as tungsten or fluorescent or daylight. Using those in the appropriate lighting will give you accurate colors most of the time, but even those presets will not always give you accurate colors. When auto or the presets fail you, then you are shooting in more complicated lighting, and that's where the custom and Kelvin options come in. The custom option is my favorite because it allows you to very quickly and easily adjust for a complicated lighting situation. All you need to use is a gray or white balance card like these here. The key to the card is that it's a perfectly neutral tone of white or gray with no color cast to it. And I've actually put together a free custom white balance guide that explains how to use the custom white balance option for each of the major manufacturers, and you can get that guide at this link right here. In a nutshell, how custom white balance works is that it uses the neutral tone of the white or gray card as a reference. Because the card is color neutral, the camera is able to analyze the wavelength of the light being reflected off of the card and then correct for it in the photos. But sometimes even custom white balance can't quite get it right, and for that you need to use the Kelvin or color temperature option. But what the heck is Kelvin and what is color temperature? Kelvin is a scientific scientific temperature scale, and we use Kelvin in photography to refer to specific wavelengths of the light. For example, tungsten light, which again emits orange light, has a wavelength of around 600 nanometers, and that is a color temperature of about 2500 Kelvin. A cooler, bluer light would have a color temperature of around 6000 Kelvin. What the Kelvin white balance option allows you to do is dial in a specific color temperature for your white balance. This is very useful for two reasons. First, if you know the color temperature of the light source, you can just dial that in with the Kelvin option for absolutely perfect white balance. For example, this type of LED panel is really popular for photography and videography, and the manufacturer tells us that the light from this panel is 3200 Kelvin. Knowing that, I can just set my Kelvin white balance to 3200 and start shooting. And second, with the Kelvin option, you can set it to whatever you want to make the colors in your photos look exactly the way you want them to look. Depending on your camera, you may get a live preview while adjusting the Kelvin setting, or you may have to set it and take a test photo and then refine it. But regardless of that, you can use the Kelvin option to refine exactly how the colors look in your photos. So, white balance is a tool to help ensure your colors look the way you want them to look. And with that in mind, there are a few more things you need to know to really maximize your use of white balance. First, the white balance option is not available in any of your camera's auto modes. You need to be shooting in program auto, any priority mode, or full manual in order to be able to change the white balance. Second, if you capture your images in RAW, all of that extra data saved in that RAW file, which is data that is lost when you capture and save as JPEG. All of that extra data will give you tremendous latitude in correcting and altering the colors of your photos when you process the RAW images. For example, here in Lightroom, with this RAW image, I'm able to quickly and easily correct the color using the eyedropper tool. I can also select from among the standard camera presets, and I can specifically set my own white balance using the white balance sliders. Third, if you want consistency in your colors across your photos, you should not be using auto white balance. The problem with auto white balance is that for every photo you take, it recalculates the white balance for the scene. This can lead to color variations in photos that are shot under the same lighting conditions. And this can be a huge pain when editing. Let's say you decide to make changes to the white balance or just to the colors of the photo in general. If you do that, those variations in white balance across those photos will give an inconsistent look to that whole set. Now, if that's not a problem for you and you've been using auto white balance and you're happy with it, then keep on with it. But if you've ever been frustrated because photos you've shot in the same lighting have color variations, then you should stop using auto white balance. So, since we're talking about white balance, I have a question for you. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no? Leave a comment to let me know, and the comments is also where you will find out how I feel about pineapple on pizza. Don't forget to get my free guide to getting perfect colors with custom white balance at this link right here, and then get out there and take some damn photos. Thank you for watching. Now, I get loads of questions and they all boil down to one thing, which is how do I make my camera do what I want it to do? And here's the thing, your camera is like an instrument, and you can't make music if you can't play your instrument. If you want to learn how to play your camera like the instrument it is, visit this link right here to check out my Guide to Shooting in Manual Mode video course.